Brenda Hartwell kept stealing my firewood for the fourth time this month. For weeks, this entitled real estate agent had been raiding my woodpile while I recovered from surgery. $1,800 worth of seasoned oak, stolen piece by piece like I wouldn't notice. She thought a grieving veteran was an easy target. Fatal mistake, Brenda. So I replaced my real firewood with hollow logs packed with legal flash charges. One grab, one explosion, one very loud announcement of her crimes to the entire neighborhood. But that boom was just the opening shot. What I discovered about Brenda over the next 6 weeks, let's just say her firewood theft was the tip of a very dark iceberg involving missing HOA money and some very dangerous people. What would you do if your HOA Karen kept stealing from you while you were bedridden? Drop your location below, because this gets so much worse. My name's Marcus Mac Donovan, 52 years old, retired Army Corps of Engineers after 23 years defusing bombs in places most people can't pronounce. 8 months ago, I moved to Pinecrest Estates, a quiet Colorado subdivision where the biggest explosion you'd expect is someone's backyard barbecue going wrong. I bought the corner lot specifically for Elena. The morning mountain air carried the scent of pine needles and possibility as we planned her dream garden and my workshop. Pancreatic cancer took her 3 months before we could break ground on that garden, but I built the workshop anyway. The smell of fresh wood shavings mixed with her lingering vanilla perfume became my grief therapy, the rhythmic buzz of my planer, the only thing that quieted the deafening silence she left behind. Pinecrest Estates seemed perfect. 47 homes, families who actually knew each other's names, and an HOA with reasonable rules like don't paint your house neon green, and maybe don't store that rusted Camaro on blocks in your front yard. Then Brenda Hartwell got elected HOA president, and reasonable went out the window faster than a cat with its tail on fire. Picture your worst suburban nightmare Karen, but with a real estate license and the organizational skills of a prison warden. 48 years old, drives a white Mercedes GLS that she details more often than most people shower, lives in the biggest McMansion at the end of Maple Cul-de-sac. Her husband Craig sells pharmaceuticals and has the personality of wet cardboard. Perfect match, really. Brenda's signature perfume, something that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, would cling to my garage walls for hours after her property compliance inspections. She had this way of clicking her French manicured nails against her clipboard while explaining violations with the condescending patience of a kindergarten teacher. The trouble started in October when I ordered 6 cords of seasoned oak for winter. $1,800 worth of premium firewood, stacked neatly in my backyard following every setback requirement in the HOA covenant. I needed it for the workshop. Colorado winters don't mess around, and Elena had always loved the crackling sound of burning logs while I worked on her furniture designs. The firewood lasted exactly 1 week. Tuesday morning I stepped outside with my coffee and nearly choked on the steam. 2 entire cords had vanished overnight. Not scattered by wind or ransacked by animals, professionally removed, leaving neat gaps like missing teeth. The remaining stacks looked deliberately rearranged to camouflage the theft. The gravel in my driveway still showed fresh tire tracks from something heavy, something Mercedes-sized. Thursday brought a certified letter that hit my front door with the distinctive thud of incoming legal warfare. Inside, a formal citation for aesthetic standards violation, signed with Brenda's flourishing signature. Excessive firewood storage creates visual blight and fire hazard, the letter declared. Resident must reduce to maximum 1 cord, properly covered, minimum 20 feet from all property lines. Compliance required within 10 days or face $200 daily fines. I grabbed my tape measure and walked the property. 20 feet from all property lines on my corner lot? The math was simple. Impossible. My legal storage area would be roughly the size of a closet. The brilliance of Brenda's trap crystallized. She'd engineered an impossible compliance standard specifically for my property, then stolen most of my firewood while I scrambled to follow her rigged rules. Police response, civil matter, contact your attorney. Attorney consultation, $400 an hour for what promised to be a legal marathon against someone who earned 6 figures selling overpriced suburban dreams. That night, I sat in my workshop surrounded by Elena's unfinished projects, listening to November wind rattle my empty woodshed. The bitter irony tasted like copper in my mouth. 23 years surviving actual combat, only to get systematically destroyed by a clipboard-wielding suburban terrorist. But Elena always said I was most dangerous when people assumed I was harmless. Time to remind our neighborhood dictator why you should never underestimate a grieving demolitions expert with nothing left to lose. My first counterpunch was surgical precision wrapped in suburban politeness. Friday morning, I printed high-definition screenshots from my security cameras. Timestamps clear, license plates visible, Brenda's face caught in perfect criminal clarity, loading my Firewood into her pristine Mercedes. I walked across the street to her house at exactly 8 a.m., right when she'd be sipping her overpriced coffee and checking her real estate listings. The doorbell played some pretentious classical tune that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery bills. "Good morning, Brenda." I held up the photos with the calm smile Elena always said made me look like a polite serial killer. "Beautiful morning to discuss property theft, don't you think?" Her face cycled through more colors than a Las Vegas slot machine. The aroma of her expensive coffee couldn't mask the sudden scent of fear sweat. "I have absolutely no idea what you're implying, Marcus." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I spread the photos on her marble foyer table like evidence at a crime scene. "That's your Mercedes. That's my Firewood. That's you committing felony theft while I recovered from surgery." Brenda's perfectly applied foundation couldn't hide the panic creeping across her features. Through her garage window, my missing wheelbarrow sat like a neon confession sign. "This is harassment," she stammered. But her voice had lost its usual commanding authority. "Here's my offer. Return my property within 24 hours. Pay for the wood you've already sold, and withdraw that ridiculous citation. We'll forget this neighborly misunderstanding." Her eyes narrowed into angry slits. "You have 48 hours to remove those cameras or face a restraining order for stalking." I gathered my photos with deliberate slowness. "Brenda, I've dismantled bombs in Afghanistan. Your legal threats are about as intimidating as a wet napkin." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle her decorative glass panels. I walked home whistling Elena's favorite song. By noon, Brenda had escalated beautifully. A formal HOA complaint materialized in my mailbox. Resident intimidation and aggressive behavior constituting harassment of board members. The letter threatened immediate legal action for creating hostile environment through stalking and intimidation tactics. But my morning reconnaissance had already paid dividends. Facebook Marketplace revealed Brenda's spectacular stupidity. Premium seasoned oak, $8 per bundle, limited quantity available. Posted from her personal account with photos clearly showing my distinctive purple spray-painted log ends. Elena's organizational system I'd religiously maintained. The woman wasn't just a thief, she was an amateur. Then Dave Patterson knocked on my door around dinner time, looking like he'd discovered a body in his basement. "Mac, we need to talk about your Firewood situation. And about Brenda." Dave's confession opened floodgates that changed everything. This wasn't targeted harassment, it was systematic neighborhood predation. While his family vacationed at Disney, Brenda's property inspection had somehow resulted in his missing patio furniture. Margaret Walsh, the sweet 70-year-old 3 houses down, discovered her 50th anniversary garden gnomes had vanished after she'd questioned increased HOA fees. She told Margaret the gnomes violated tasteful decoration standards, Dave explained, his electrician's hands clenched into fists. Those gnomes were hand-painted in Germany. Margaret cried for 3 days. The tactical picture crystallized like a military intelligence briefing. Brenda wasn't running personal vendettas. She was operating a calculated theft ring using HOA authority as legal cover. Target vulnerable residents, create impossible compliance scenarios, profit from the chaos while maintaining plausible deniability. I remembered something from my Army intelligence training. Criminals always escalate when confronted. They can't help themselves. Brenda's restraining order threat wasn't defensive posturing. It was offensive positioning for her next attack. "Dave, how many other neighbors has she hit?" "At least 6 that I know of. Tools, decorations, outdoor furniture, always during compliance inspections when people aren't home." That evening, I called Tom Morrison, the retired lawyer who lived in the Tudor house with roses that would make Martha Stewart weep with envy. Tom had lost a property tax appeal last year after Brenda somehow influenced the assessment process, another data point in her corruption pattern. "I can provide informal legal guidance," Tom offered after reviewing my evidence. "But Mac, you're dealing with someone who's weaponized bureaucracy. She's created a system where fighting back makes you look like the aggressor." We spread documentation across Tom's mahogany dining room table. Photos, timestamps, Facebook screenshots, HOA correspondence. The pattern emerged with military clarity. Identify vulnerable targets, manufacture violations, exploit authority gaps, profit systematically. "She's not just stealing property," Tom observed, adjusting his reading glasses. "She's stealing people's sense of security in their own homes." But studying the evidence triggered something deeper than anger. Professional fascination. 23 years dismantling explosive devices had taught me to think like my opponents. Every bomb maker had patterns, weaknesses, trigger mechanisms that could be exploited. Brenda Hartwell was about to discover that some veterans don't just fight back, they systematically dismantle their enemies with the same methodical precision they once used to save lives. The opening shot had been fired. Now came the real war. My second counterpunch was documentation warfare that would make Pentagon prosecutors jealous. Saturday morning, I assembled an evidence portfolio thick enough to choke a horse. High-resolution photos, financial calculations showing Brenda's Facebook profits, and a neighborhood theft map revealing her systematic predation pattern. The morning air carried the crisp scent of autumn leaves as I hand-delivered copies to every resident, watching neighbors' faces transform from polite skepticism to white-hot fury as they recognized their own missing property in Brenda's marketplace listings. By afternoon, I'd posted the security footage on our neighborhood Facebook group with surgical precision. Anyone recognize these midnight movers? The digital explosion made Hiroshima look like a firecracker. Within 2 hours, 47 comments flooded in. Sarah Jules spotted her solar lights in Brenda's garage background. Robert Sterling, ironically one of Brenda's board allies, realized his stolen barbecue tools were being sold by his own HOA president. Margaret Walsh's German gnomes appeared in a weekend estate sale ad, priced at $150 each. But Brenda's desperate retaliation revealed something I hadn't expected. She was far more dangerous than a simple suburban thief. Monday brought nuclear warfare, an emergency board meeting notice claiming I was conducting a harassment campaign threatening community safety. The agenda included a $500 special assessment per household for enhanced security measures, and discussion of my immediate removal for creating hostile environment through veteran-related intimidation. The smell of panic and expensive perfume lingered in the community center as Brenda presented her case to a packed room. She'd transformed herself from caught criminal into concerned community leader, complete with crocodile tears about feeling unsafe in her own neighborhood. Marcus Donovan has military training in explosive devices, she announced, her voice trembling with practiced fear. He's been photographing our homes, studying our schedules, making threats about his particular set of skills. How long before his PTSD episodes escalate to violence? The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and my blood pressure spiking into dangerous territory. But then Dave Patterson stood up, his electrician's voice cutting through Brenda's performance like a wire stripper. Brenda, where's my patio furniture? I beg your pardon? My outdoor dining set disappeared during your inspection while we were at Disney. Funny thing, it showed up on Facebook Marketplace the next day. Same distinctive scratch on the table leg from where my kid's bike handle hit it. Margaret Walsh rose slowly, her 70-year-old voice carrying decades of steel. And my anniversary gnomes, the ones you said violated decoration standards? One by one, neighbors stood up. Susan Patterson, Tom Morrison, even quiet Mrs. Jules from the corner house. Each shared their story of mysterious disappearances coinciding with Brenda's inspections. That's when the real mini-twist hit like a tactical nuke. Craig Hartwell, Brenda's pharmaceutical sales husband, walked into the community center and dropped a manila envelope on the front table. His face looked like he'd been gargling with gravel for a week. Those are Brenda's bank statements, he announced to the stunned room. And the divorce papers I filed this morning. Turns out my wife's been funding a gambling addiction by stealing from our neighbors. The envelope's contents spilled across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Casino receipts, underground poker debts, loan shark payment schedules. Brenda's theft operation wasn't feeding suburban greed. It was feeding a $180,000 gambling addiction that had spiraled completely out of control. Suddenly, everything made sense. The systematic targeting, the professional removal techniques, the desperate escalation when confronted. Brenda wasn't a power-hungry HOA dictator. She was a desperate addict feeding dangerous creditors who'd probably break her legs if payments stopped. From my Army intelligence days, I remembered something crucial about compromised individuals. They become exponentially more dangerous when their survival depends on maintaining their lies. Cornered addicts don't surrender. They lash out with increasing desperation until someone gets seriously hurt. The room erupted in chaos as neighbors processed the revelation. Brenda stood frozen like a deer in headlights, her carefully constructed victim narrative collapsing around her designer shoes. But I noticed something that made my tactical instincts scream warnings. Brenda's purse was open, and inside I glimpsed what looked suspiciously like a small recording device. She'd been documenting this entire confrontation, probably planning to edit the footage into evidence of my threatening behavior for police reports. This wasn't desperate defense. It was calculated offense, setting up her next attack while playing the victim card. As neighbors demanded answers and Craig detailed the extent of her debts, I realized Brenda had just revealed the true scope of danger we were all facing. Gambling addicts with $180,000 debts to dangerous people don't just steal garden gnomes. They do whatever it takes to survive, and that included destroying anyone who threatened their operations. Elena always said the most dangerous enemies were the ones with nothing left to lose. Looking at Brenda's cornered desperation, I finally understood what kind of war I was really fighting. My third counterpunch was pure psychological warfare disguised as helpless vulnerability. Wednesday morning, I ordered 2 cords of premium seasoned oak delivered to my front yard with all the subtlety of a marching band. The delivery truck's rumbling diesel engine announced my replacement inventory to every house within 3 blocks. I made sure to tip the driver loudly enough for Brenda's surveillance cameras to record my theatrical gratitude for such beautiful wood to honor my late wife's memory. By Thursday, I'd spread word through Dave Patterson that I was heading to Denver for follow-up surgery, a 3-day medical procedure that would leave my property completely unguarded. The story rippled through our neighborhood's gossip network faster than spilled coffee across a white tablecloth. Of course, I'd actually be camping in Dave's guest room with night vision binoculars and a cooler full of Elena's frozen casseroles, watching my backyard like a hawk studying field mice. Brenda took the bait with the enthusiasm of a Black Friday shopper hitting a clearance sale. Thursday evening brought 3 reconnaissance passes in her Mercedes, each one slower and more brazen than the last. Through Dave's upstairs window, I watched her calculate removal logistics with the cold efficiency of a military quartermaster planning a supply raid. But Friday morning's Facebook post revealed just how far her desperation had escalated. Premium oak bundles available this weekend, 2-year seasoned, perfect for cozy fires. $15 per bundle, cash only, limited quantity. She was pre-selling my wood 12 hours before stealing it. The woman had turned theft into a subscription service. Then Saturday afternoon delivered a mini twist that froze my blood solid. A black Escalade with windows darker than a coal mine parked across from Brenda's house. 2 men in suits that probably cost more than my monthly pension sat inside for 47 minutes, occasionally checking phones with the patient menace of professional debt collectors. These weren't neighborhood watch volunteers. My Army intelligence training kicked in like muscle memory. Gambling addicts with 6-figure debts don't get gentle payment reminders. They get visits from people who solve collection problems with crowbars and shallow graves. Brenda wasn't just stealing to feed her addiction anymore. She was stealing to stay alive. That realization changed everything about my strategy. Cornered animals don't surrender. They lash out with desperate violence that can destroy everything around them, including innocent neighbors who happen to live too close to the explosion. Sunday evening, my old demolitions buddy Jake Sullivan arrived from Denver with what looked like camping gear, but was actually military training equipment that could wake the dead. Hollow log flashbang devices, Jake explained, hefting one of 12 identical units. Completely legal for licensed explosives handlers, designed for catching thieves red-handed. They'll make enough noise to alert every house within 3 blocks, and enough light to temporarily blind anyone looking directly at the source. The devices look perfect. Identical bark texture, proper weight distribution, even realistic wood grain patterns. Brenda could examine them all day and never suspect anything until she grabbed one and triggered the motion sensor. "How loud are we talking?" I asked, positioning the units throughout my woodpile like deadly Easter eggs. Jake's grin reminded me of our Kandahar demolition days. "Loud enough that your HOA president will need new underwear and a good explanation for why she was stealing wood at midnight." Monday brought ominous confirmation that time was running out. The Escalade returned with 3 occupants who spent an hour photographing Brenda's house and reviewing what looked suspiciously like payment schedules written in red ink. Dave Patterson appeared at my door around noon, his electrician's hands shaking like autumn leaves. Mac, those suit guys knocked on Mrs. Jules's door asking about Brenda's business arrangements. When she said she didn't know anything, one of them smiled and said they'd help her remember if needed. The tactical picture crystallized with terrifying clarity. Brenda's creditors were escalating from surveillance to intimidation, which meant she had maybe 24 hours to produce payment before they started making examples out of innocent neighbors. Desperate addicts facing violent deadlines don't have the luxury of careful planning. She'd hit my woodpile tonight, tomorrow at the latest, triggering an explosive revelation that would expose her crimes to everyone within hearing distance. As twilight painted my booby-trapped Firewood in golden shadows, I realized Elena would have found dark humor in the situation. Her pacifist husband, using military explosives to catch a suburban wood thief, all while protecting neighbors from loan sharks who'd wandered into the wrong zip code. Sometimes justice requires a very loud wake-up call. Tonight, Brenda Hartwell was about to receive the loudest alarm clock in HOA history. Tuesday morning brought the discovery that shattered everything I thought I knew about Brenda Hartwell. A manila envelope slipped under my door containing documents that made my demolitions training seem like child's play. The handwritten note was in Craig's pharmaceutical sales scrawl. Found these in her home office safe. You need to see what you're really fighting. She doesn't know I have copies. See. Inside, HOA financial records that told a story darker than I'd imagined. Over 18 months, Brenda had systematically stolen $47,000 from our community reserve fund through fake vendor invoices and unauthorized expenditures. What I'd assumed was petty neighborhood tyranny was actually calculated embezzlement that left every homeowner liable for special assessments to cover the missing money. But the real gut punch was buried in Craig's divorce discovery documents. Brenda's gambling addiction wasn't feeding casual poker games. She owed $230,000 to an underground network that had connections reaching into organized crime. The men in the black Escalade weren't just debt collectors. They were enforcers who'd already visited 3 other debtors in the past month. One was found in a Denver parking garage with both legs broken. The message was clear. Pay up or become an example. The timeline was terrifying. Brenda had 72 hours to produce $25,000 or face enhanced collection procedures that would extend to anyone in her immediate vicinity. In criminal speak, that meant neighbors, friends, anyone unlucky enough to live within her blast radius when the violence escalated. My phone buzzed. Meet me at the Starbucks on Maple. Come alone. Craig. 20 minutes later, I sat across from a man who looked like he'd been living in a bunker for weeks. Craig's professional polish had cracked, revealing raw terror that made my military PTSD look like mild anxiety. She doesn't know I copied these, he whispered, sliding another folder across the sticky table. Or that I've already filed for divorce and witness protection through the state program. The folder contained photographs that explained Craig's haunted expression. Surveillance shots of their house taken with telephoto lenses. Pictures of Brenda's Mercedes with slashed tires and a note left on the windshield. Evidence that her creditors had escalated from phone calls to physical intimidation. How bad is it, really? Craig's hands shook as he sipped his coffee. They broke into our house last week while she was at her book club. Didn't steal anything, just left evidence they'd been there. Moved furniture. Went through her closet. Left the front door unlocked so she'd know they'd been inside. The psychological warfare was textbook intimidation, the kind of pressure that makes rational people do increasingly desperate things. That's why she's been stealing from everyone, Craig continued. The firewood, the garden decorations, even Mrs. Jules's solar lights. She's liquidating anything valuable enough to make payments and buy more time. But Craig's final revelation changed everything about tomorrow night's plan. She knows about your replacement firewood, Mac. She's been watching your house with binoculars, planning to steal it tomorrow night to make her next payment. But she also knows you're some kind of military expert, so she's bringing backup. What kind of backup? Her creditors offered to help with the theft in exchange for a larger payment. 3 men with criminal records, planning to hit your house at midnight when the neighborhood's asleep. They think you're just some harmless veteran with expensive wood. The manila envelope contained one final document that made my stomach drop. Architectural plans of my house, complete with entry points and security camera locations. Brenda hadn't just escalated to organized crime. She'd invited dangerous criminals into our quiet neighborhood to help rob the one person trying to stop her. Tomorrow night wasn't going to be a simple theft caught on camera. It was going to be an armed confrontation that could destroy everything Elena and I had built in Pinecrest Estates. Tom Morrison's basement transformed into mission control faster than you could say HOA corruption. His mahogany conference table, which had probably hosted decades of boring legal consultations, now displayed our neighborhood like a military operation, complete with property maps, financial evidence, and enough documentation to convict a congressman. Gentleman and lady, Tom announced to our assembled team, adjusting his reading glasses with the gravitas of a Supreme Court justice. We're not just catching a firewood thief anymore. We're protecting 46 families from financial ruin and potential violence. The smell of Tom's wife's famous apple cinnamon candles mixed oddly with the tension as we planned our suburban sting operation. Dave Patterson spread my property blueprints across the table like a general planning D-Day. If Brenda's bringing criminal backup for a midnight heist, we need to control every variable. Sightlines, lighting, escape routes, witness positioning. Susan Patterson had calculated the community financial impact with accounting precision that would make the IRS weep with joy. Brenda's embezzlement means every homeowner faces a $1,200 special assessment to cover the missing reserve fund. For elderly residents like Margaret Walsh, that's choosing between medication and mortgage payments. The scope hit us like a cold slap of Rocky Mountain air. This wasn't about my stolen wood anymore. It was about protecting neighbors from becoming collateral damage in Brenda's criminal spiral. Jake Sullivan opened his equipment case with the reverence of a chef unveiling his best knives. 12 hollow log flashbang devices, completely legal for licensed explosives handlers. They'll produce enough noise to wake 3 neighborhoods and enough light to temporarily blind anyone staring directly at them. From my concealed carry research years ago, I remembered something that made our entire plan legally bulletproof. Colorado Revised Statute 184401 allows private citizens to detain anyone caught committing a felony, provided they witness the crime directly and use minimum necessary force. Here's your knowledge nugget, I announced, feeling like a suburban professor teaching criminal justice 101. Theft over $2,000 automatically qualifies as felony in Colorado. Once Brenda grabs my wood, we have legal authority to detain her until police arrive. Tom nodded like I'd just solved quantum physics. The key is proper documentation and restraint. We're not vigilantes. We're concerned citizens exercising legal rights to protect our community. Our strategy crystallized into phases that would make Elena proud of my organizational skills. Susan would coordinate neighbor safety, ensuring families stayed indoors during our midnight fireworks show while having emergency contacts ready. Her accountant brain made her perfect for explaining complex embezzlement evidence in terms everyone could understand without needing law degrees. Dave would handle our technical infrastructure, backup lighting around my property, redundant power systems for recording equipment, and communication networks that would make NASA jealous. Tom would manage legal coordination, citizens arrest paperwork, police response protocols, and evidence cataloging that would survive the most aggressive defense attorney cross-examination. Jake would oversee tactical elements, device placement, timing coordination, and safety protocols, ensuring our spectacular demonstration remained completely harmless while maximizing neighborhood wake-up potential. My job was quarterback, monitoring everything, calling plays at optimal moments, and ensuring everyone's safety while delivering maximum justice with minimum collateral damage. The hollow log devices scattered throughout my woodpile looked so realistic that I almost grabbed one myself during final positioning. Jake's craftsmanship would fool professional thieves, let alone desperate suburban criminals operating under deadline pressure. Each device produces sound equivalent to standing next to a jet engine during takeoff, Jake explained, testing remote systems with the enthusiasm of a kid with new fireworks. 0 physical damage, but guaranteed to announce theft activities to everyone within hearing distance. We rehearsed scenarios until timing became second nature. Solo Brenda theft. Single device activation plus immediate police contact. Criminal backup situation. Wait for full commitment, then illuminate the entire neighborhood like New Year's Eve in Times Square. The psychological warfare aspect appealed to my Army intelligence background. Criminals facing spectacular public humiliation often confess everything to minimize their embarrassment. Brenda's gambling debts and embezzlement history would likely pour out in front of responding officers, awakened neighbors, and anyone armed with smartphone cameras. As Wednesday evening approached, our team dispersed to battle stations. Tom positioned in his study with legal documents and emergency contact numbers. Dave and Susan coordinating neighborhood watch from their perfect upstairs vantage point. Jake monitoring technical systems from my garage like NASA ground control. Me in Dave's guest room with remote detonation controls and direct sight lines to my booby-trapped backyard buffet. The autumn air carried hints of winter's approach as we watched Brenda's house through night vision equipment that made suburban surveillance feel like international espionage. Her garage showed movement suggesting final preparations for tonight's criminal enterprise. Elena's wedding ring pressed against my chest, warm from body heat and heavy with memory. "Help me protect our neighbors without becoming the monster," I whispered to her spirit. At 11:45 p.m., headlights appeared in Brenda's driveway. Showtime. 11:47 p.m. Three men climbed out of the black SUV like they were reporting for work at Crime Incorporated. Through Dave's guest room window, I watched them examine my property with the casual efficiency of contractors estimating a renovation job, except their tools included bolt cutters and what looked suspiciously like police-grade surveillance equipment. The smell of Dave's leftover pizza mixed with my nervous sweat as we realized Brenda had upgraded from desperate amateur to middle management in somebody's criminal enterprise. "Holy shit, Mac," Dave whispered, nearly dropping his binoculars. The tall one just pulled a tablet from his bag. "He's photographing every house on our street like he's conducting a real estate survey from hell." My stomach dropped faster than a lead balloon. These weren't random muscle hired for a one-time theft. They were professional burglars conducting advanced reconnaissance for systematic neighborhood exploitation. Through my scope, I watched Brenda emerge from her garage transformed into someone I barely recognized. Gone was the entitled HOA princess who'd terrorized us with clipboard authority. This version moved with the jerky paranoia of a hunted animal whose survival depended on criminal success. "She looks like she hasn't slept in weeks," I observed, noting the way her hands shook while handling what appeared to be a police scanner. Whatever her creditors threatened, it scared her into becoming someone completely different. But the real mini-twist arrived when the lead criminal made a discovery that changed our entire game plan. "Movement at your front door," Dave hissed, pointing toward my house with the enthusiasm of someone spotting a rattlesnake in his garden. Through night vision, I watched one of Brenda's accomplices examine my security cameras with systematic thoroughness that made my Army intelligence training seem amateur. He produced a small electronic device and began methodically disabling my recording equipment. "They're jamming our cameras," I realized with growing dread. Someone taught them how to neutralize standard surveillance systems. Jake's voice crackled through our communication headsets like a radio announcer delivering apocalyptic news. "Confirmed signal interference on conventional recording equipment. But here's the beautiful part. They're jamming commercial frequencies, while our military-grade devices operate on completely different channels." The tactical picture shifted like a magician revealing the trick behind his best illusion. Brenda's criminal allies had come prepared for sophisticated resistance, which meant they'd researched my background and expected military-level security measures. But their electronic warfare preparation revealed a fatal blind spot. They were focused on disabling evidence collection rather than detecting explosive surprises. Professional burglars expect cameras and alarms, not hollow logs packed with flash charges that could wake the dead. "Mac," Susan's voice whispered through our communication system with the urgency of someone reporting a house fire. Margaret Walsh called from her bedroom window. "One of those men has been photographing door locks and testing windows on every house on our block." The scope expanded beyond tonight's theft into something that made my blood turn to ice water. They weren't just stealing my firewood. They were mapping our entire neighborhood for future criminal operations, using Brenda's HOA knowledge as inside intelligence for systematic burglary campaigns. Elderly residents living alone, expensive outdoor equipment, security system weaknesses, daily routine patterns. They were building a criminal database that could result in months of break-ins affecting every family we'd sworn to protect. "Dave, this isn't about my wood anymore," I whispered with the dawning horror of someone realizing they'd stumbled into something much bigger than expected. "They're planning to turn our entire neighborhood into their personal ATM machine." Through our scopes, we watched the lead criminal note outdoor lighting patterns, catalog security camera blind spots, and even test gate latches on houses whose owners slept peacefully, unaware that their homes were being evaluated for future invasion. But their thoroughness created an unexpected advantage. While they focused on mapping neighborhood vulnerabilities with the dedication of suburban cartographers, they remained completely oblivious to the explosive welcoming committee waiting in my carefully arranged woodpile. The irony would have made Elena laugh. Professional criminals defeated by their own professionalism, so focused on sophisticated security systems that they missed the old-fashioned booby trap hiding in plain sight. "All teams prepare for fireworks," I announced through our communication network, my finger hovering over remote detonation controls like a pianist preparing for the performance of his lifetime. "They're approaching the backyard buffet." Elena's wedding ring pressed against my chest, warm from nervous body heat and heavy with the weight of protecting our neighbors from predators who'd invaded our quiet sanctuary. Through Dave's window, I watched Brenda lead three dangerous strangers toward my explosive surprise with the tragic determination of someone whose choices had spiraled beyond redemption. The longest night in Pinecrest Estates history was about to become the loudest wake-up call in suburban Colorado. Time to remind career criminals why they should never underestimate retired Army engineers with nothing left to lose. 12:03 a.m. Brenda's criminal crew descended on my backyard like vultures at a roadkill buffet. The lead thief examined my woodpile with professional interest while his partners positioned themselves as lookouts, their coordination suggesting this wasn't their first neighborhood shopping spree. The November air bit through Dave's guest room window, carrying the metallic scent of approaching snow and the faint diesel exhaust from their idling SUV. My remote detonator felt like a loaded gun in my sweaty palm. "Jesus, Mac, they brought a fucking dolly," Dave whispered with the incredulous tone of someone watching professional movers rob his neighbor. "They're planning to clean out your entire stack in one trip." Through night vision, I counted my 12 explosive Easter eggs scattered throughout the woodpile like landmines at a picnic. Jake's craftsmanship was so perfect that even I couldn't distinguish the hollow devices from real firewood in the darkness. But watching Brenda coordinate the operation revealed a transformation that would have impressed military logistics instructors. "Take the oak first," she directed with crisp authority that belonged in a boardroom, not a crime scene. "Skip anything green or wet. We need premium wood that sells fast on Marketplace." The woman who'd terrorized neighbors with clipboard citations was now managing felony theft with the efficiency of a warehouse supervisor. Desperation had provided an education no suburban experience could match. "All devices armed," Jake's voice crackled through our headsets like NASA announcing rocket launch readiness. "Motion sensors active, remote backup standing by. When they grab those logs, we're lighting up Colorado." But the mini-twist nearly gave me a heart attack when Brenda's lead accomplice became suspicious. "Hold up," the tall criminal announced, crouching beside my woodpile with the careful attention of a bomb disposal expert examining suspicious packages. "Something feels wrong about these logs." My stomach dropped into my boots as I watched him test one of Jake's hollow devices, rotating it like a detective studying evidence. Professional thieves develop survival instincts about normal versus modified objects, and our deception was facing its first real-world examination. "Weights off," he continued, tapping the bark surface with his knuckles. "This one sounds hollow as a campaign promise." Dave's guest room fell silent except for 4 people simultaneously holding their breath. If they discovered our explosive surprise before springing the trap, we'd face armed criminals who'd consider our deception an act of war. But Brenda's gambling deadline created unexpected salvation. "I don't care if they sound like church bells," she hissed with desperation that carried across the frozen yard. "My payment's due in 16 hours or we're all fish food. Load the damn wood before I shoot you myself." Her creditor pressure trumped professional caution, forcing the crew to proceed despite suspicions. Addiction had become our tactical ally, driving Brenda to override security concerns that could have exposed our operation. The tall criminal shrugged and lifted the suspicious log anyway, muttering something about crazy bitches and their deadlines. The motion sensor's tiny red light winked once in the darkness. "Contact," Susan whispered through our communication system with Super Bowl play-by-play intensity. Through my scope, I watched 3 criminals and 1 desperate HOA president commit fully to grand larceny, reaching for multiple logs simultaneously while discussing loading strategies and escape timing. The perfect moment crystallized like mountain ice. Maximum exposure, complete documentation, optimal neighborhood wake-up potential. But just as my finger moved toward the detonator trigger, an unexpected sound froze everyone in place. Police sirens growing louder, approaching from the direction of Maple Street. "Shit!" Brenda's panicked voice carried clearly through the night air. "Someone called the cops!" The criminal crew abandoned my woodpile faster than tourists fleeing a rattlesnake convention, grabbing their equipment and sprinting toward their SUV with the desperate speed of cockroaches when kitchen lights suddenly illuminate their midnight party. "Wait!" I called into our communication system, watching our carefully planned confrontation dissolve into chaos. "Those aren't real police sirens." Tom Morrison's voice crackled through our headsets with barely contained laughter. "Sorry, folks. Margaret Walsh got nervous and activated her home security system's panic button. The alarm company's automated response includes police siren sounds to scare off intruders." The irony was so perfect that Elena would have laughed until she cried. Our elaborate military operation to catch thieves had been accidentally triggered by a 70-year-old woman's nervous finger and a home security system designed to sound exactly like what we needed. Brenda's crew had fled empty-handed, leaving behind only tire tracks and the smell of burned rubber from their panicked escape. But through Dave's window, I watched Brenda herself standing alone in my backyard, staring at the woodpile she'd been seconds away from stealing, her face a mask of desperate fury and crushing defeat. The game wasn't over. It was just entering sudden death overtime. 12:17 a.m. Brenda stood alone in my backyard like a woman facing her own execution, staring at the woodpile that represented her last chance to avoid loan shark retribution. The false alarm sirens had faded, leaving only November wind and the sound of her desperate breathing. Through Dave's window, I watched her make the decision that would trigger the most spectacular neighborhood awakening in suburban history. She grabbed one of my hollow logs. Boom! The flashbang explosion lit up Pinecrest Estates like God's own camera flash, the 120 decibel thunder crack echoing off house walls and car windshields as Brenda stumbled backward, temporarily blinded and completely disoriented by the military-grade surprise party. "What the hell was that?" Voices shouted from every direction as porch lights blazed to life and neighbors poured from their houses in bathrobes and pajamas, drawn by the sound of what seemed like a small war erupting in their quiet cul-de-sac. But the real fireworks were just beginning. 3 police cruisers screamed onto Maple Street with red and blue lights painting our neighborhood in law enforcement colors, responding to multiple 911 calls about explosions and possible terrorist activity that had flooded the emergency dispatch center. Officer Martinez leaped from his patrol car to find Brenda sitting dazed in my backyard, surrounded by scattered firewood and smoke that smelled like military training exercises, while 43 neighbors gathered in a growing crowd that looked like the world's most dramatic block party. "Ma'am, step away from the whatever just exploded," Martinez commanded, his flashlight beam revealing Brenda's singed hair and shell-shocked expression. That's when I made my entrance with the timing of a Broadway star hitting his cue. "Officer Martinez," I called, walking across my lawn with the evidence portfolio that would end Brenda's criminal career. "I believe Mrs. Hartwell just triggered my perfectly legal theft detection system." The crowd of neighbors buzzed with excitement as I spread high-definition photographs across the patrol car's hood like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Security footage showing Brenda stealing my firewood, Facebook Marketplace screenshots proving she'd been selling stolen property, financial documents revealing systematic embezzlement from our HOA reserve fund. But the mic drop moment came when Craig Hartwell pushed through the crowd, carrying a manila envelope that contained the nuclear option. "Officers," Craig announced with the broken voice of a man whose marriage had become a crime scene, "my wife owes $230,000 to organized crime figures, and she's been stealing from our entire community to make payments to people who've threatened to kill us both." The neighborhood crowd fell silent except for the crackling of smoke from my explosive device and the distant sound of additional police sirens approaching. Craig's envelope spilled across the patrol car hood like evidence at a federal trial. Casino receipts, loan shark payment schedules, photographs of the criminals who'd fled when Margaret's panic button triggered false alarms, and bank records showing how Brenda had systematically looted our community's financial reserves. "She's been running a theft ring," Dave Patterson announced to the assembled crowd. "My patio furniture, Margaret's garden gnomes, Mrs. Jules's solar lights, all stolen during fake HOA inspections." Margaret Walsh stepped forward with the righteous fury of a 70-year-old woman whose anniversary gifts had been sold to pay gambling debts. "Those gnomes belonged to my late husband. They were hand-painted in Germany for our 50th wedding anniversary." The crowd's mood shifted from curious excitement to white-hot anger as neighbors realized the scope of Brenda's systematic predation on their community. But the moment that sealed her fate came when Tom Morrison presented the HOA financial audit that revealed how every homeowner faced $1,200 special assessments to cover Brenda's embezzlement. "She didn't just steal our property," Tom announced with courtroom authority. "She stole our financial security and invited organized criminals into our neighborhood." As backup units arrived and crime scene investigators began documenting evidence, I watched Brenda's transformation from neighborhood dictator to broken criminal play out under the harsh glare of police spotlights and smartphone cameras. The explosive device had served its purpose perfectly, catching a thief red-handed while providing irrefutable documentation of her crimes for the crowd of witnesses who would ensure accountability. Officer Martinez approached me as paramedics checked Brenda for injuries from the flashbang exposure. "Mr. Donovan, that was the most creative citizen's arrest I've encountered in 20 years of police work." I looked across our gathering of neighbors, people who'd been terrorized, stolen from, and financially exploited by someone they'd trusted with community leadership, and realized Elena would have been proud of how we'd chosen justice over vengeance. "Officer," I replied with the satisfied smile of someone who'd protected his community while honoring his wife's memory, Sometimes the best way to catch a thief is to let them announce their own crimes. The hollow logs had delivered exactly the explosive justice our neighborhood needed. 6 weeks later, Pinecrest Estates had transformed from a community under siege into something Elena would have treasured. Neighbors who actually knew each other's names and wouldn't hesitate to share a beer while discussing property line disputes like civilized human beings. Brenda pled guilty to felony theft, embezzlement, and racketeering charges, receiving 18 months probation, 800 hours of community service, and a restitution order totaling $52,000. Her real estate license disappeared faster than donuts at a police station, and Craig's divorce proceedings had relocated him to witness protection in another state, presumably somewhere that gambling debts and explosive neighbors weren't daily concerns. The most satisfying irony? Brenda's community service involved maintaining the Elena Donovan Memorial Garden we'd established in our neighborhood common area, complete with hand-painted German gnomes donated by Margaret Walsh, and solar lighting that Mrs. Jules had insisted on contributing. Every Saturday morning I watched Brenda tend Elena's memorial flowers with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that community service meant actually serving the community she'd tried to systematically loot. My election as HOA president was unanimous, the first time in Pinecrest Estates history that all 46 residents agreed on anything more controversial than snow removal schedules. Our new bylaws mandated monthly financial transparency reports, annual independent audits, and a rotating oversight committee that would make future embezzlement schemes about as feasible as selling ice to Eskimos. Dave Patterson became my unofficial deputy, applying his electrical expertise to community projects with the same precision he'd used during our neighborhood sting operation. Susan's accounting background made her our permanent treasurer, tracking every penny with forensic dedication that would impress IRS investigators. The Elena Fund Scholarship Program had exceeded expectations, funded through speaking fees from my story appearing in Military Times, Veterans Today, and surprisingly Better Homes and Gardens, who'd apparently decided that explosive home security represented cutting-edge suburban defense strategies. But the real transformation was personal healing mixed with practical community protection. Elena's workshop had evolved from grief therapy hideaway into the neighborhood's unofficial meeting center, where Tuesday evenings found me teaching basic woodworking skills Elena had always encouraged me to share. Jake Sullivan had become our semi-permanent security consultant, conducting quarterly legal property protection workshops that attracted participants from neighboring communities. His presentations consistently sold out, though he'd made me promise never to reveal certain classified techniques from our demolition days. The ripple effects spread beyond our borders. Colorado legislators passed the Community Financial Protection Act, requiring HOA audits and board background checks after media coverage of Brenda's operation reached representatives dealing with similar constituent complaints statewide. Local veterans organizations partnered with our HOA to create security and service programs where retired military personnel taught practical skills to community members. Everything from basic home security to emergency preparedness to conflict resolution that didn't require military-grade pyrotechnics. 3 other communities had contacted me for advice on removing corrupt board members, leading to what Tom Morrison jokingly called my HOA liberation consulting practice. Turns out, retired demolitions experts possess transferable skills when dismantling corrupt power structures threatening innocent families. Every evening, I sat in Elena's memorial garden watching neighbors walk dogs, kids ride bicycles, elderly residents tend flowers without fear of citation harassment. The peace she'd dreamed about when we'd chosen Pinecrest Estates had finally arrived, just not through the path either of us had expected. Speaking of unexpected paths, next week I'm driving to Phoenix to help a disabled Marine whose HOA is trying to foreclose on his home for displaying an American flag. Apparently, some people never learned that veterans don't surrender to clipboard-wielding tyrants without explosive resistance. But that's a story for another time. The smell of Elena's memorial roses mingles with mountain air as I finish this